It's a new day dawning, the time is at hand, where the glory of the Lord will be revealed to every man. Open the door, open the door, open the door, and let the King of Glory in. Open the door, open the door, open the door, and let the King of Glory in.
Let the King of Glory in. Open up the doors starts right now. So fling wide, you heavenly gates, and prepare the way of the risen Lord. The Apostle John was on the island of Patmos. He was in prison for the testimony of Jesus Christ, and he heard a sound behind him, and he said, behold, I looked. There was a door standing open in heaven, and I heard a voice which was like a trumpet speaking with me, saying, come up here, and I will show you the things which must take place. That's what we need, my friends. We need a heavenly perspective of the things that are going on in the world around us, the things that the Word of God foretold us would come to pass, those things which must take place, those things which are taking place even now. That is what this broadcast is all about, discussing the issues of the day, discerning the times in which we live from a biblical perspective and worldview. Good afternoon, everybody. Andy White here, and what you are about to hear is the fusion of heart, mind, and soul. And thanks for tuning in all across the fruited plain. And I am streaming live on Facebook Live for those of you who might be joining me there on Facebook Live. If you'd like to join me on my Open Up the Doors Facebook page to see what's going on behind the FM microphone here at Faith FM, go on over to facebook.com/FaithFM 91.7. That's the Open Up the Doors Facebook page. If you've never liked the page, please like it and get plugged in. Let us know where you are viewing from. Let us know where you are watching from. I'd like to get a conversation going on over there at Facebook Live. And for those of you who are joining in on Facebook Live, please, please, please do me a real solid favor and share this in your streams and invite people to the broadcast, invite people to the page of Open Up the Doors. And sharing is caring, as they say. You can also email me at ajwhite777@icloud.com. That's ajwhite777@icloud.com. And as always, I've got a stack of stuff to get through, and I think I'm just gonna hit it. I won't give any weather reports today. It's kind of a nasty day outside today on the east end of Long Island. Some rain, some thunderstorms. Didn't I just say I wasn't going to give a weather report? But anyway, sometimes it's just like you want to ease into things, but I've got some really serious stuff here, quite honestly. And, some of the things we've been seeing the last several weeks, the last week in particular, that's going on in our society, in our culture. Folks, I need to tell you, the incivility, I'll say that again, the incivility has gone over the cliff, folks. I think that's probably pretty evident to anybody who's paying attention. But what I've been warning about for over 2 years now is sadly and seemingly coming to pass, I think. It seems like we're heading towards something that I've been warning about, and it's becoming more and more of a reality. I've just been hypothesizing the last few years and commentating on our culture about the possibility of an impending or coming civil war. But in the last few weeks, we've seen some pretty alarming things, to say the least. Homeland Security Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen was bullied out of a restaurant by an angry anti-Trump mob, and a similar mob also shut up outside her home the last few weeks. What I want to do, folks, is I want to lay out a whole bunch of stuff to set the foundation for where I'm going with this broadcast today. And I'm just going to go through stuff that's only been happening really within the last 10 days. And like I said, it was just last week that the Homeland Security Secretary she was bullied out of a restaurant where she was having dinner with an associate. In fact, it was last Tuesday, a week and a half ago, when Department of Homeland Security Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen was confronted and harassed by the D.C. chapter of the Democratic Socialists of America. Let that name ring in a little bit. Let it settle in a little bit. Let it seep in a little bit. The D.C. chapter of the Democratic Socialists of America, as she dined in a Mexican restaurant near the White House. But here's why I said let that seep in a little bit. One of the socialist protesters who accosted Secretary Nielsen, it's come out that she works for the Department of Justice. She's a Department of Justice employee. Now, just last week, in last week's broadcast, I was talking to you about the deep state and how the deep state has infiltrated all of the alphabet soup bureaucracies and agencies throughout the federal government. And here we have someone who yeah, okay, she's got the right to protest, but I don't know. A Department of Justice employee who works for the administration, disrupting and harassing the Homeland Secretary in a personal time in a restaurant. I don't know. I think personally that's beyond the pale. Yeah, because it's that same deep state shadow government that exonerated the criminal actions of Hillary Clinton. Yeah, the DOJ. This person who was part of the protest works in the DOJ. I want to say that again. And she had some things to say that I'm going to bring up in a moment. But that same deep state shadow government that exonerated the criminal actions of Hillary Clinton, and make no mistake about it, they were criminal actions. And that whole investigation opened up the diversionary Mueller investigation. Yeah, how sweet they all are. And this little peacenik, I want to call her a peacenik, because one of the things she was chanting was no sleep, no peace. But Allison Abar, or I don't know how to pronounce her last name, Raybar. I'm going to just, her name's spelled kind of odd, but first name's Allison. Allison Raybar is a member of the Democratic Socialists of America. And again, she attended this protest as a Department of Justice employee against Kirstjen Nielsen. In similar fashion, like I said, I want to lay out a bunch of things here. In similar fashion, White House advisor Stephen Miller has a mob of protesters chanting in front of his home for several days now, over a week, in downtown D.C. as of last Monday. Not even this past Monday. This is going back 2 Mondays ago. As many of you, I'm sure, are aware, last Friday, Press Secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders was asked to leave a restaurant in Lexington, Virginia by the owner of the Red Hen because of Sanders' role in just having a job in the Trump administration and being the press secretary. And there are other incidents that are flying under the radar of national attention, but nonetheless, they're serious and an indicating factor of the things that are happening all around us. But here are some other incidents flying under the radar. A Virginia Beach man was charged last Friday, the same day that Sarah Huckabee Sanders was thrown out of the restaurant. Last Friday, a Virginia Beach man threatened to murder his local congressman, Representative Scott Taylor. Was there a full moon out last Friday? I mean, really, seriously, folks, was there a full moon out last Friday? Because on the same day as the aforementioned incident last Friday, the U.S. Attorney's Office of the Western District of Virginia also announced the arrest of a Roanoke, Virginia man, accused of threatening to murder Republican Congressman Bob Goodlatte over social media. And if you go and read that story, this guy was really off the rails. So all in one day, we got Sarah Huckabee Sanders being thrown out of a restaurant. We've got two different congressmen being threatened by constituents. Angry constituents. And then in Florida, this guy, Lawrence Key, was arrested this past Tuesday and charged after threatening his congressman, U.S. Representative Brian Mast, and said he was going to kill the congressman's young children, a girl and 2 boys. All within the last week. We're having these angry folks who have been incited to violence one way or the other, all coming against representatives in our government. who all happen to be Republican at the moment, by the way. In another, oh, by the way, this guy Brian Mast, this guy Lawrence Key Lawrence Key called up Brian Mast's office something like 490 times. I mean, completely harassing his representative. And this guy Brian Mast is a war hero, by the way. This guy Brian Mast lost his limbs in service to the United States, in being in the military. But in another incident, again, to make the case of what's just been going on in the last 2 weeks or less. In another incident, ABC News reports that a senior DHS official living in the Washington, D.C. area found a burnt and decapitated animal on his front porch. Again, another part of a series of violent threats with greater frequency because of those who are opposed to President Trump's policies and presidency. The report cited by the DHS Deputy Secretary Claire Grady, quote, was given on specific and credible threats that have been levied against certain DHS employees and a sharp increase in the overall number of general threats against DHS employees. In fact, I think it was just last night, as a matter of fact, there had been a protest sit-in at a facility in Portland, Washington, and last night the federal agents went in and broke up that protest, that sit-in that was going on at a DHS facility in Portland, Oregon. And I just read before I came on the broadcast today that the DHS facility in D.C. has been put down, I shouldn't say put down and shut down, but it's been blocked so nobody can get in there to protest. But here again is what I'm setting this all up to say. What I've been hypothesizing about and giving commentary about for the last few years now is being asked by major newspapers now. 2 years ago, or less, it was really less than 2 years ago, I did a broadcast entitled, "Is Civil War Coming to America?" Okay? Now you've got a major newspaper. Just the other day, USA Today headline, "Is America Headed Toward a Civil War?" Sanders and Nielsen incidents, the Sanders and Nielsen incidences show it has already begun. That was a headline in the USA Today paper. According to them, the Civil War has already begun. From the article, let me just read a paragraph or two from the article. Press Secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders and Homeland Security Director Kirstjen Nielsen experiences at restaurants suggest a soft civil war, quote unquote. A soft civil war is well underway. And the other day, author Tom Ricks asked whether we're heading toward a civil war. You see, folks, what I've been saying as a I don't want to say a voice in the wilderness, because there are others who are bringing this up. But it's hitting the mainstream now. People are worried. People are very concerned. This guy, Tom Ricks, asked whether we're heading toward a civil war. Quote, "I don't believe we're to Kansas of the 1850s yet, but we seem to be lurching in that direction," he wrote. Folks, hear me out. I don't think it can be reasonably denied. I really don't. That the left and its allies in the media are poking and deliberately trying to provoke an incident. I've been saying this now for well over a year and a half, 2 years. When you hear that mob in the video of the Mexican restaurant where Kirstjen Nielsen was eating, when you hear the mob in that video of people yelling at her, she's just there trying to eat dinner with a coworker. Or when you think about Sarah Huckabee Sanders, who went out with her family trying to enjoy a Friday evening meal like so many of us want to do on a Friday after work. And then she's asked to leave the restaurant because of who she works for. Because of who she works for and what her politics might be. You got to ask the question, what's next? What's next? Congressman Steve King, I believe he's a congressman from Illinois. I'm not sure, but I think he's a congressman from Illinois. But Steve King last Sunday tweeted out again, quote, "America is heading in the direction of another Harper's Ferry. And after that comes Fort Sumter. Now, just to give you a little bit of a really quick refresher in American history, Harper's Ferry was the site of an 1859 raid on a federal armory led by militant abolitionist John Brown. Brown's attack was aimed at sparking a massive slave uprising, and the incident at Harper's Ferry helped to push the already divided country towards civil war. There were abolitionists who and you know, they had a good cause. They wanted to see the abolition of slavery, but they were pushing and they were provoking and they were prodding to get America to get into that place of civil war. And John Brown, it was a pretty famous incident. John Brown intended to provoke the increasingly heated situation, and he succeeded in part, because less than 2 years after the Harper's Ferry incident, America's bloody Civil War began with the opening shots fired, as you well know, on Fort Sumter in Charleston Harbor on April 12th, 1861. Protagonists and instigators, my friends. I've been speaking about this for such a long time. Protagonists and instigators, those who want to foment a revolution, those who want to foment civil unrest, those who want to foment, I don't know, I hope to God not, but even a violent civil war. The terminology being used right now is a soft civil war. But remember our little socialist friend I mentioned a moment ago from the DOJ, Allison Haybar? Let me quote what she said in an interview after the demonstration that shamed Kirsten Nielsen out of the restaurant. Quote from Allison: "If you see these people in public," meaning people who are in the Trump administration, "you should remind them that they shouldn't have peace," she said. "We aren't the only ones who can do this. Anyone who sees Kirsten Nielsen at dinner, anyone who sees anyone who works at DHS and ICE at dinner can confront them like this. And that's what we hope this will inspire people to do." That's what we hope will inspire people to do. Well, lo and behold, our little peacenik socialist did inspire someone. And someone a bit more publicly known and more powerful than this unknown Allison Haybar, who's now known. I wonder if she's getting censured, or reprimanded from the DOJ. Just a thought. But again, look what she said. "We hope that this will inspire people to do the same." Enter Maxine Waters. Maxine Waters has taken up the challenge, my friends. Maxine Waters wants more people to harass Trump administration officials in public spaces. Now, listen, folks, I get it. Everyone has the right to protest. If someone's having a town hall, you can go there and protest. If someone's having a speech somewhere or a rally, you can go there and protest. But I think a line has been crossed when you start having mobs surround people's homes, private homes and private residences. I think a line has been drawn when you start harassing people in public facilities like restaurants and diners or whatever. And Maxine Waters went on a rant this week. The California Congresswoman went on this shouting rampage during a toy drive, of all places. A toy drive. She went on this rant. And Waters, referencing the incidents I've already mentioned in part. Quote from Maxine Waters, and this is all on video for those of you who may not have heard this, for those of you who may not be aware of this is all on video. Maxine Waters, quote, "Already you have members," she's like, addressing President Trump. "Already you have members of your cabinet that are being booed out of restaurants," as the crowd just applauded and erupted into shouts of praise for her. She goes on to say, we have protesters taking up at their houses, at their homes, who say, no peace, no sleep, no peace, no sleep. And so she goes on to say, let's stay the course. Let's make sure we show up wherever we have to show up. Remember what Allison Haybar's challenge was. So let's stay the course, Maxine Waters says. Let's make sure we show up wherever we have to show up. And if you see anybody from that cabinet in a restaurant, in a department store, at a gasoline station, you get out and you create a crowd and you push back on them and you tell them that they're not welcome anymore anywhere, she yelled. They're not going to be able to go to a restaurant. They're not going to be able to stop at a gas station. They're not going to be able to shop at a department store, Waters told her troops and her sycophants. The people are going to turn on them. They're going to protest, and they're absolutely going to harass them. Folks, let me tell you something. That is outrageous and unacceptable coming from a member of Congress. And one congressman has submitted a motion to censure Maxine Waters. But okay, I hope she does get censured. But that's all that is a reprimand. It doesn't really carry any weight other than to say, hey, what you did was wrong. But at least it would be something. At least it would be something, because it's outrageous. But Maxine Waters ended her rant by saying, God is on our side. And the crowd went wild. Which God, I don't know. Or maybe I do know. Because several years ago at the DNC convention, when God was mentioned, everybody booed. Just, trying to, by way of reminder. But Waters ended her rant by saying, God is on our side. On the side of the children. That's, again, kind of odd coming from the mouth of a rabid pro-abortionist. God is on our side. On the side of what's right. On the side of what's honorable. I was thinking about that, folks. God is on our side. That was the credo from another Civil War era Democrat, Stonewall Jackson. Stonewall Jackson was sure that God was on the side of the Confederacy. He's actually a pretty interesting guy, Stonewall Jackson. You should go and read some of his bios on the internet. He really was a believer in the Lord, though his politics had him twisted. But he was a man of his time. He was a man molded, like so many of us are, by our times and circumstances. But Stonewall Jackson was sure that God was on the side of the Confederacy. Jackson believed the cause of the Civil War and the cause of the Confederacy was, quote, was a religious crusade. God is on our side. But Abraham Lincoln wisely said this: my concern is not whether God is on our side. My greatest concern is to be on God's side, for God is always right. Our God. Welcome back. Andy White here. You are listening to Open Up the Doors here on Faith FM, WEGB 90.7 and 93.3 in Napeague, and WEGQ 91.7 in Quag. And the views expressed by the host of this show, namely me, are molded by the Word of God along with the empirical evidence, both experiential and observational, which is lived out by me on a daily basis, and not necessarily the views of Faith FM, necessarily. But they are my views. Hey, someone just told me during the Selah break here, that's what I call these musical breaks, these musical interludes, are Selah breaks, because it's all about the fusion of heart, mind, and soul. And Selah means to meditate on everything that's been previously spoken of beforehand, when you see that in the Psalms, just as a little aside. But someone just mentioned on Facebook Live that there's been a shooting reported at a newsroom near Baltimore, and I don't have any of the details on that. Wasn't able to access that during the break. So as I get any further information, I will mention that. If you folks I'm watching my comment stream here on Facebook. So if you guys can give me any, 1 sentence, 2 sentence updates, I'll be sure to, make mention of that, what's going on right now. And if that's the case, I don't know anything about what's going on right now with that, other than hearing that there's been a shooting at a newsroom. And I don't know the motives, obviously. I don't know anything about it yet. But in light of what I've been talking about, in light of what we are talking about, it's concerning. It's very concerning. Rasmussen poll. Most people know what the Rasmussen poll is. And this past week, Rasmussen did a poll asking people if they felt that America was heading towards a civil war. Now, before I get into the details of that poll a little bit, ask yourself a question, folks. Ask yourself a question. Has there ever, in your lifetime, that I can't think of any time, but has there ever been a poll like this before? Asking the general public, taking a poll of whether people think we're heading towards a civil war? I mean, I can't even come close to ever thinking that's ever happened before. The Washington Examiner wrote a piece inciting the Rasmussen poll. The Washington Examiner said the division in the United States that has escalated into the organized harassment of presidential aides. Let that sink in. The organized harassment of presidential aides, according to this Rasmussen poll, has 6 in 10, that's 60%, has 60% worried about the violence from anti-Trump advocates, and nearly a third of Americans fearing it will end in a civil war. This survey from the Rasmussen reports found that 59% of all voters, quote, are concerned that those opposed to President Trump's policies will resort to violence. Rasmussen said that 31% of likely voters say it's likely that the United States will experience a second civil war sometime in the next 5 years, with 11% who say it's very likely. Folks, that's a total of 42% of Americans who think that we are likely or very likely heading for a real civil war. 31%, it's likely to happen sometime in the next 5 years. Next 5 years? How's about the next 5 months? With the left in full meltdown mode with the announcement of Justice Anthony Kennedy retiring, with the deep state cabal increasingly being exposed, as I was sharing last week, and as actually trying to stop and undermine the Trump presidency, I'm going to tell you the next 5 months are going to get and be intense at the very least. I'm going to change gear a little bit. In light of all the stuff that's going on, the times that we're living in, the dangers and the turmoil that we're facing. In his epistle, the Apostle James asked the question in chapter 4, where do wars and fights come from among you? Don't they come from the evil desires at war within you? You lust and do not have. You murder and covet and cannot obtain. You fight in war. You want what you don't have. So you scheme and you kill to get it. You are jealous of what others have, but you can't get it. So you fight and wage war to take it away from them. Remember, folks, a few years back, when Nancy Pelosi and Maxine Waters and the rest of the leftists there in the media were bashing the Tea Party for their protests and accusing them of inciting violence and incivility? Of course, none of that was true. The Tea Party protests were actually very civil. I actually went to a few of them myself here on Long Island. The Tea Party protests all around the country, by and large, mostly all the time, were very civil, with people showing up at rallies or at town halls, like I said earlier in the broadcast, which all Americans have a right to do. But they were simply showing up with signs and simply having rallies, protesting against policies and high taxes and big government. And they didn't riot, they didn't loot, they didn't burn down their neighborhoods, they never harassed people. They didn't call for the harassment of members of Congress, even though we were opposed to their policies. They never called for the shooting or the violence. Now, I'm not saying that any congressmen are calling for shooting and violence. Don't misunderstand me. But their minions are. Look at so many of the left-wing propaganda papers or the mainstream media. They're provoking and prodding. But the Tea Party, they didn't burn down their neighborhoods. And they even cleaned up after themselves. Really, they did. There was never any violence at a Tea Party rally, even though the left so often tried to accuse them of it. But it was only that, accusations without any proof and exaggerations. There was never any real violence at a Tea Party rally, except maybe one or two times when it was crashed by someone from the other side who wanted to create a situation. It's always the M.O., it seems, of the leftists to provoke an incident and then blame the other side. The point that I'm trying to bring up, and bringing that up, is that all these leftist hypocrites who were railing and screaming for civility back then seem to have no problem with this actual off-the-rails incivility and inciting of violence, and many are even supporting it. I need to tell you, folks, hypocrisy and double standards aren't even the right terms anymore, because this is way beyond that. This is a pathological, premeditated duplicity. And the left's collective conscience, along with their media sycophants, I believe has been seared through a hot iron. I know that sounds strong, but I see it in the things I'm hearing in videos and in the print media. The leftists are literally, in the most literal sense of the term, living in an alternative reality, folks, where light is darkness and darkness is light, where sweet is bitter and bitter is sweet. And I want to tell you, that makes for a very dangerous situation. If they keep stoking the flames of this vitriol, somebody's going to get killed. And I think we're pretty close to somebody getting killed already. And I'm not trying to be sensationalist. It was already attempted a year ago at a congressional baseball game, don't forget. And things have gotten worse politically speaking since then. There comes a point. There comes a point where things spin out of control from the rhetoric and with the news media fanning the flames. The Bible says there is a way that seems right to a man, but his end is the way of death. The prophet Isaiah cried out. It was actually God, through the prophet Isaiah, cried out, said, I have stretched out my hands all day long to a rebellious people who walk in a way that is not good according to their own thoughts. And here's where I want to hit on something right here before I go to another break, because this is at the heart of the matter. Where do wars and fights come from within you, James asked. You see, folks, when you abandon the true God, you become a law unto yourself. When you abandon the true God, you create your own rules. You create an arbitrary and capricious moral structure. When everyone does what is right in their own eyes, there is lawlessness, and they begin to think they are little gods. Go back and read Psalm 82. I don't have the time to go through that. But real quickly, God was reproving those wicked judges whom he set up. God sets up authorities. God sets up judges and authorities to sit in the seat of government. And the Bible says they're supposed to be his representatives. But when they don't, and they call themselves little gods, God says, I will judge you. Go read Psalm 82. But my point here right now is they make themselves, these political elite, these godless little gods, they make themselves the moral arbiters of their own little worlds. But when those worlds start colliding with each other, wars happen. Each little world believing it has the high moral ground because they've actually rejected the only standard that is the high moral ground. I want you to notice, folks, the progression of the progressives and the leftists for the last 25 to 30 years. 30 years ago, they were telling us that there were no absolutes. They were telling us that ethics and morality were situational. They even had a term called situational ethics for it. But now they're telling us, oh, no, there is a right and wrong. And they themselves are the ones who determine what that is. They say what is right and absolute. And if you don't agree with them, you are the one who is absolutely wrong. And not only are you wrong, you will be ostracized. You will be shut down. You will be punished for disagreeing with them and being an obstacle standing in the way of their utopia. And this new American fascism, this neo-fascism, is even more dangerous than all the other fascist philosophies and ideologies that have gone before it. Whereas those were more political and socio-economic in nature, this new fascism is rising up with the arrogance of a pseudo-morality and spirituality, thinking it possesses the spiritual and high moral ground. There is a way which seems right to a man, but its end is the way of death. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that verse when we come back. I got to take a break now, but here's a tune called Pray, which we need to do, folks. The fusion of heart, mind, and soul. This is Open Up the Doors with Andy White here on Faith FM, WEGB 90.7 and 93.3 in Napeague, and WEGQ and 91.7 in Quag. And thanks for joining in with me for this live edition of Open Up the Doors, folks. It's great to be here. It's always a thrill to be here. Just speaking with you and sharing my heart with you all across the fruited plain. I am also live streaming on Facebook Live. If you'd like to jump in on the conversation over there, you can visit my Open Up the Doors Facebook page at www.facebook.com/FaithFM 91.7. That's facebook.com/FaithFM 91.7. And if you've never liked my Open Up the Doors Facebook page, please like the page. I got some things I got to get to. In fact, other things are going on right now that I want to address, and it's going to change the direction of my broadcast. But I want to bring this to the forefront here because folks have been telling me about it on Facebook, and there's a breaking news story right now that Fox News is reporting that multiple deaths. Okay, pause. Once again, Jesus be with these people. I don't know the cause. I don't know the motives. I don't know the incidents of what this is all about. But multiple deaths, according to Fox News. The suspect was caught after reports of shots fired outside a Maryland newspaper office, sheriff says. Again, folks, this is just hot off the press. I don't know what's going on. I'm just going to read it straight from the Fox report here. A suspect was apprehended following reports of shots fired and multiple fatalities in Annapolis, Maryland, Thursday afternoon, just moments ago. Outside the Capital Gazette newsroom, Ann Arundel, Sheriff Ron Bateman told Fox News. Oh, Ann Arundel is a county there in Annapolis. That's the name of the county, Ann Arundel. Anyway, Fox News says police warn of the possibility of more shooters. However, that has not been officially confirmed. The ATF in Baltimore said they are responding to the incident. Tweets are going out that somebody began shooting up this newsroom with apparently a shotgun. According to WJLA citing sources, a shotgun was involved in the incident. This is a developing story. I'm just receiving it now, as you are as well. But sadly and unfortunately, it totally speaks into what I've been sharing on this broadcast. Again, I don't know what the motives are. Maybe it's completely unrelated. Have a gut feeling it's probably not if it's a newsroom. Somebody's been set off because of the incivility that has been in our nation for so long now. And I was speaking a moment ago about the first Civil War and how the Confederacy and leaders like Stonewall Jackson believed that God was on their side. And there was that quote by Abraham Lincoln when he said, "I'm not concerned about whether God's on my side, but whether we're on God's side." You see, folks, if we're on God's side, then God will be on our side. But it's got to be the true God. It's got to be the God that we have a relationship with, not one of our imaginations. There is a way that seems right to a man, but the end thereof is death. Something that Abraham Lincoln said shortly after the Union's defeat in the Second Battle of Bull Run. And I came across this quote the other day by Abraham Lincoln, and it really, really was thought-provoking. Listen to this. Abraham Lincoln said, "The will of God prevails. In great contests, each party claims to act in accordance with the will of God. Both may be, and one must be wrong. God cannot be for and against the same thing at the same time. In the present Civil War, it is quite possible." Now, this is the statement that really got me thinking. Lincoln said, "It is quite possible that God's purpose is something different from the purpose of either party. And yet the human instrumentalities, working just as they do, are of the best adaptation to effect his purpose." God's purposes are always higher and more eternal than anything that we can think of, folks. In the days of Rehoboam, son of Solomon, civil war broke out between Rehoboam and Jeroboam, who was a servant of Solomon, and it was of the Lord. God divided Israel into the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom of Judah. And then, in the days of Jehu, centuries later, God divided up the northern kingdom of Israel and allowed the Assyrians to conquer them and scatter them around the nations. My point in bringing this up, and I think Abraham Lincoln's point, was simply this: that God deals with nations as he sees fit, according to his plan and purposes. So it is incumbent upon us not to claim that God is on our side. Now, I know the scripture says, if God be for us, who can be against us? I understand that. But God will be for us when we are for him. God's not going to rubber stamp our agendas. We need to get on board with his agenda. And as I've repeatedly said throughout the course of Open Up the Doors, the political maneuverings and machinations of men are nothing more than the prophetic determinations and the purposes of the living God. There is a way that seems right to a man, but its end is the way of death. I don't know where all this is going to play out. I don't know how all this is going to play out, this present crisis, this present situation in our national life. I don't know how it's all going to play out. I do know, however it plays out, God's working it for his ultimate purpose, completely and utterly. There is a way that seems right to a man, but its end is the way of death. That word end in this proverb, and in many other places throughout the Old Testament, is a Hebrew word, akarit. The Hebrew word akarit comes from the word meaning back. What's behind you? And it basically is saying something like this. I could be all dressed up really nice from your perspective. You're looking at me from the front. But there could be, to make a play on words, my trousers, my pants could be split down the middle in the back. And I don't know it, and you don't know it. And I could be walking ahead thinking everything's really cool and good and right and proper. There is a way which seems right to a man. But in the end, after all is said and done, and everything passes, you see a big split down the middle of my pants in the back. It's got that picture, this word akarit. In other words, the things of God are hidden from this side until the things pass. So akarit literally means that which comes after. So often we think that we're doing things the right way, but what's the aftermath? I think a good transliteration of akarit would be aftermath. What is the aftermath of your actions? What is the aftermath of this situation? You see, again, I'll say it again, the principle is that you can't see it from this vantage point. But you will see it at the end of days. I'm running out of time here. There's this great verse that everybody knows. I said a moment ago, I don't know how this thing's going to play out. And I'm going to keep reporting on it and keep warning on it, keep warning people about it, because the bottom line is this. No matter what's going down, we've got to be preaching the gospel and telling people about the life and the greatness and the glory that lies ahead for those who are in Jesus Christ. And you see there's this great verse in Jeremiah 29:11 that says this, "For I know the thoughts that I think toward you, says the Lord. Thoughts of peace and not of evil, to give you a future and a hope," is how we read it in the English. But the Hebrew says, "I know the thoughts that I think toward you, to give you an akarit." You see, the akarit of believers will be blessed. Those who go their own way, making up their own rules, thinking that their way is right, their end, their akarit will be death. But the akarit of believers will be blessed. So I want to tell you this in closing before I run out of time completely, folks. In these days in which there's so much incivility, those of us who know the Lord, those of us who are walking not with God on our side, but with us on his side. In these days of incivility, I want to leave you with this on this broadcast today. What Paul wrote in Romans: repay no one evil for evil. Have regard for good things in the sight of all men. If it is possible, as much as depends on you, live peaceably with all men. Beloved, do not avenge yourselves, but rather give place to wrath. For it is written, vengeance is mine, I will repay, says the Lord. Therefore, if your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he is thirsty, give him a drink. For in so doing, you will heap coals of fire on his head. But folks, here's the bottom line in all of this. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. And I'm out of time, folks. But I thank you for joining with me today. Please share this around your Facebook streams for those of you who are watching on Facebook Live, and come back again next week to open up the doors of the fusion of heart, mind, and soul.